There's no right way to hit a woman. Welcome to Boldly Go, a newbie look at the Star Trek Enterprise. Now, this episode didn't leave much of an impact on me. We're going to be talking about Charlie X, the second episode of the first season. Now, I had a lot of problems with this episode, story-wise and especially character-wise. My biggest problem is Charlie. Charlie is supposed to be a character that at the end you feel sympathy for because even though he's done every horrible thing you could possibly imagine, from mass murder to mass murder, basically, repeatedly, making people disappear, turning them into salamanders, taking their faces off. Charlie does all of these things, and yet at the end we're supposed to feel some kind of poignant sympathy for him, for he is only a teenager who has been brought up in a race of non-corporeal beings, and he only wants to be touched and shown affection. No! I do not feel any sympathy for this character, and unfortunately this was definitely not a good second episode. This wasn't a good episode in general, and here are my reasons why. The character of Charlie, his introduction was novel. As a child who had not been brought up around people, it would have been much more interesting had Charlie been a little bit more primal, being brought up on his own, supposedly, with only a computer for company. A child of 3 over 14 years still wouldn't have even the most basic social skills if its only interaction was a computer. And Charlie seems to have at least some small modicum of social etiquette. Just a little bit. Now, they really overplay. He interrupts people. That's wrong. He slaps girls on the butt. That's wrong, apparently. And of course, that's where we get our famous line, "There's no right way to hit a woman." Okay. I think what would have been a much better speech from Kirk is, some things you do with your guy friends you just don't do with girls. You know, if we were going to continue to perpetuate gender stereotypes, we could certainly go that route, but that's neither here nor there. So the character of Charlie, because he eventually, being an adolescent with so much power, which I give them props for, putting an adolescent, giving him power, that is just a recipe for a downfall and some kind of disaster. Unfortunately, the disaster here was the episode itself. Charlie is just not sympathetic. Places where they meant for it to be awkward fall flat. His interactions with Janice, Hume, and Rand, very flat, and it's not the desperation of a teenager just finally discovering his hormones. It's honestly the desperation of a person who's insane. They're trying to play off Charlie as, oh, well, he's a teenager, and teenagers all go through a crazy phase. Yes, teenagers do go through a crazy phase, but they still at least learn something in the end. Charlie didn't learn anything except possibly if at the very end he begs and pleads with the crew and plays on their sympathies, he might not have to go back with the floating heads. In this way, the episode was less than stellar. I didn't like it and I didn't appreciate it, and Charlie was the biggest issue, but he wasn't the only issue. I feel like they kept trying to push Kirk as some kind of a father figure to Charlie. And having him try and be the father figure, I can see where they were going with that. I can see where that would possibly work. But just with him also going from hot to cold, being sympathetic, and then being very cold towards Charlie, it didn't work. Even at the end, when Charlie's begging, the only person who reacted to his begging and his pleading was Janice, who, frankly, he was stalking. And so I feel like using Kirk as that sympathetic father character, I don't feel was the right choice. I really feel McCoy would have been better. Even though McCoy is abrasive and argumentative, McCoy is a little bit older. McCoy I feel would have been a better choice. But McCoy tries to put this onto Kirk. And again, even though the kid looks up to Kirk, you know, having someone there guiding him, Kirk seems to, instead of having somebody there to help this teenager understand what is and isn't right, to help, frankly, a human being who has had absolutely zero social interaction, instead of taking the time to help him, not even have to do it personally, but telling the crew, somebody needs to be his caretaker for right now, help introduce him into society. Clearly that would have been the logical choice. Why Spock didn't think of it, I don't know. Anyway, so Kirk also here fell flat, and I don't think the writer should have been trying to make him a father figure. I think maybe sometime down the road it would work, but since we're only just now getting to understand Kirk, all I understand of Kirk now is that he's kind of a jerk. Also, he clearly can't fight, and his rolling techniques are a little awkward. I'm not sure what that one scene was for, but, well, it was the introduction, of course, to showing Kirk that Charlie has these amazing abilities that he used to kill 20 people on a starship, and why they didn't kill him, get rid of him immediately, I'm not sure. So, one thing I will say is having Charlie have a major meltdown and temper tantrum, very, very much an adolescent thing, and having him abuse his power would have happened. But again, any other adolescent would have at least learned something at the end, would have said, okay, you gave me these boundaries, you gave me these rules for a reason. That is never expressed with Charlie. And like I said, that's a flaw. Charlie is sort of a one note, he's just a crazy teenager. There's very few times when you can feel sympathetic for him, when he has a tender side, because he just does things on his own whim. Nobody appreciates a brat, and in this case, doubly not appreciated. So, basically Charlie and the interaction between Charlie and Kirk were just not well done. And that's pretty much it for me for this episode. So, let's go on to triple rating. Triple rating, at the bottom of the screen, you will see a triple rating from 1 to 5. And I am giving Charlie X 1 triple. The whole basis of this episode was supposed to be based on the interaction of a child and Kirk. And that's all I talked about because that's all that was supposed to be there. And even though this child has extraordinary powers, the entire thing fell flat. His interactions were awkward when they weren't meant to be awkward, and when they were meant to, it didn't come across that way. It just felt profoundly uncomfortable, and not in a way that perpetuated the fact that this child was socially awkward. So, 1 triple for this one. Alright guys, I will see you next time for the next episode. Take care.